Hello and welcome to Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I interview entrepreneurs doing startups across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on companies that have some relationship to Latin America. My guest today is Diego Saez-Gil, an entrepreneur from Concepcion, Argentina, who is co-founder of Bluesmart, a company that creates luggage for the internet age. You can check your bag's location from your phone to make sure that it got on the plane with you, and find out where in the world it is if it didn't. It also has a battery charger, a built-in scale so you never pay overweight bag fees, and a remote lock to keep your luggage safe. Bluesmart has offices in New York, Argentina, and Hong Kong, and has sold more than 35,000 carry-ons. Diego and his team raised $2.2 million for Bluesmart by pre-selling 10,000 units on Indiegogo, then did Y Combinator before raising $18 million in funding from investors in China, Latin America, and the United States. Prior to Bluesmart, Diego was the co-founder of WeHostels, a hostel booking app that had offices in New York and Bogota and was acquired by Student Universe. Diego and I get into his journey from northern Argentina to grad school to Spain to New York, down to Chile for Startup Chile, and back to New York again for WeHostels. I had a really great time getting to talk with Diego, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hello, Diego. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to do it.
Hey, thank you, man, for inviting me.
No, of course. So I'm excited to get into your story. So where are you in the world today?
Right now, I am in New York City.
And what are you doing in New York?
So we are building a company called Bluesmart, in which we pioneer the smart luggage category. 3 years ago, we invented the world's first smart suitcase featuring GPS, location tracking, weight sensors, digital locking, battery charger, and a lot of cool tech features with the idea of making the travel experience more seamless and trying to solve our own problems as travelers. And building that company led us to move to California initially, open an office in Argentina, go to China where we manufacture the product, and today we have an office in Hong Kong, headquarters here in New York, and an office in Buenos Aires.
So what's your life like being the founder of a company that has offices all over the world?
Well, it's a lot of traveling, but being a travel-related company is a good thing because we are eating our own dog food, traveling with our bags, and learning a lot about the traveler's experience. And that's great. And then we love traveling. Frankly, we started this company, kind of the mission of the company is to inspire and empower people to travel more, because we think that when you travel and you discover different cultures and different people from around the world, you become a better person. So yeah, a lot of traveling, a lot of stress, but it's fun. We're enjoying the journey.
So we'll jump into more about Bluesmart later on, but I'd like to go back to the beginning of, so you're from Argentina originally, right?
That's right, yeah.
And where in Argentina?
I'm from the north, a small town called Concepcion in the province of Tucumán, which is in the north, close to Bolivia, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So you're between like Mendoza and Salta?
That's right, yeah. It's next to Salta.
Uh-huh, perfect. And so, there's probably not all that many entrepreneurs that come out of northern Argentina and end up in New York running a worldwide company.
For sure, no, yeah.
How did that happen? What made you decide to do that or take that path?
Yeah. Often I think about it. Look, since I was a kid, I dreamed with traveling the world. I remember reading, Julius Verne's books and different books about, travelers and feeling very inspired and hoping that, someday I'll have the chance to travel abroad. And, it's not that common. Again, as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s in Argentina, in a moment of economic crisis, in a country that is very isolated from the rest of the world, I think that you could actually, travel the world and live in different places it was sort of like an unrealistic dream. But I always kept thinking about it. And then after I finished, I went to college in Tucumán. And after I finished college, I started applying through the internet, which was this, great invention that I had just discovered a few, some time ago. And I started applying to scholarships in different places around the world. which was the only way that I had to really, go and live abroad. And I finally got a scholarship in a school in Barcelona to finish a master's degree there. And as a result of that, I moved to Spain. And being there, I started, using every penny I could save to travel as a backpacker in Europe. And I visited, over 20 countries in Europe during the time of the master's, and became very passionate about traveling. And then I was very curious about coming to New York. And I always had sort of like an entrepreneurial spirit. So I didn't see myself working for a big company for, too long. So again, I hustled my way to get an internship in New York. And as a result of that, I moved from Barcelona directly to New York. And by the way, I moved to New York before visiting New York. I directly moved. And after doing an internship, for a few months, I decided to start a project from here. And with that project, which was my first startup called WeHostels, we were looking for funding, and it was so hard because I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't know anybody in New York. So we started, looking at, sources of capital to get started, and I learned about Startup Chile. And I applied to Startup Chile, and then I moved from New York to Santiago. And that's how I ended up in Chile, where, we crossed paths. And that, led me to, that sort of like was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. Yeah.
And so you went from Argentina to Europe, then back to North America, and then back to South America, right next door to start your business. So when you went to New York for the first time, what was your internship?
So it was in a design firm.
And were you doing like web design or doing product design? What kind of
product design? And I was sort of like in the business side, doing a little bit of everything, very entrepreneurial as well.
And how did you get that in the first place, coming from Spain?
Through, an uncle of mine that, facilitated that internship.
And what was it like going from Spain into New York when you first got there and you moved there without visiting? What was it like?
Dude, it was hard, man, at the beginning, because New York is not an easy city. It's an amazing city, but it's not an easy one. Very competitive, very, you have the smartest and most driven people in the world here, and they're not wasting time. Everybody's, here to accomplish their missions. But at the same time, I think that was great because it pushed me to get better in every aspect of myself, as a person, as an entrepreneur. But it was rough. And then the winter, coming from the north of Argentina, the winter here wasn't easy. But it was great, very inspiring. The energy in the city is incredible. And I end up, coming back to New York,
Did you have any culture shock going either from Argentina to Spain or Argentina, Spain to New York when you first?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. I think, it was a first shock, in Barcelona, they speak Catalan, which is similar to Spanish, but not really. And they do have definitely a different culture. And then, yes, there was a new cultural shock in New York. But at the same time, I had to adapt fast. I had no option, I think that, when you are both an immigrant and an entrepreneur, is like, you go big or you home, and you have no option but to adapt and try to understand the game as fast as possible.
A lot of sort of the stereotype, and it's kind of true from what I've seen of Latin American entrepreneurs of Latin Americans in general, is that they're not generally willing to take big risks and, take off to Spain or take off to New York without really much of a fallback. Why do you think you were willing to do that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I come from a middle class family that, even though Argentina was in a tough economic moment, I knew that my worst case scenario was coming back home and having a, shelter and food and a network of support back in my home. I think that there are other people in Latin America that don't have that luxury. So sometimes you have no option but to play it safe. Um, I think that in addition to that, I did have sort of like this very explorer spirit, and I was willing to take big risks. And I think, culturally in Latin America, this is something that's been talked a lot. The failing has a bigger burden on people than failing in let's say the US. In that, like even legally, going bankrupt in Argentina, you cannot open a company for 10 years or something like that. I guess that, I understand where some other people come from when it comes to not taking risks. But in my case, I just, had this drive and I had to do it,
When you were young, you said you had sort of the traveler mindset. Do you remember a moment when you knew you wanted to travel, or was there a specific book or movie or family member that wanted to do that?
Yeah, I mean, one specific book is Around the World in 80 Days, Julius Verne's, in which he starts in London and he goes through, Africa and India and then comes back to London. And I was just fascinated imagining all these places. And yeah, actually my grandma went to Europe when I was a kid and she came back with, all these amazing souvenirs and photos from Europe. And I was like also fascinated by all the history that Europe has, because Argentina doesn't have that much history. We do have in the north a lot of heritage of the Inca people, but not the castles that you have in Europe. So I was fascinated and very curious about that.
That's funny. My story is actually very similar. I read the same book, and my grandparents had gone on a safari in Africa, and then they went and walked on the Great Wall of China and went through China.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And I remember seeing their slides, and yeah, same thing. It's really funny.
Awesome.
So let's go back to getting to Chile. So you applied with your hostel idea to start up Chile in what year was this now?
2011, I think. We were the part of the first generation of Startup Chile, actually.
Yeah, so you were the same generation as like Adrian from Property Simple.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was the pilot round, which they have tried to erase, making us ground zero.
Right.
But so yeah, you got there in 2011,
right.
And so it would have been like late 2011.
Yeah.
How much of the business had you already built?
We had a product that was being used by a few users, and that was it, basically. Yeah.
How did you decide to start the business?
So again, during the time in Europe, I traveled as a backpacker, staying in hostels. And at the time, the first smartphones came out. The iPhone came out in 2008 or 9. But the smartphones didn't have that many apps yet. So to book hostels when you were traveling, you needed to go to the computer of the hostel, and go to the website of the hostels. So the idea was, how can we, build an app that helps you book your accommodations very quickly and then connect with other travelers along the way. And with that idea, we started building, the product that got selected into Startup Chile.
So tell me about your Startup Chile experience. How was the 6 months in the program?
Oh, it was great. It was, also for me, one of the first opportunities to connect with a network of international entrepreneurs that were all sort of like in the similar stage. And, you learn a lot from your peers. And then, I also took advantage to assemble a team in Latin America, fundraise. I spent a lot of time traveling, fundraising, and we ended up closing a round. And then I relocated. After the Startup Chile period ended, I relocated back to New York. And yeah, it was a great platform for me to make the company happen. Yeah.
And with WeHostels, where did you have your team when you went back to New York?
We actually had it in Colombia, because my partner was Colombian and he knew, a lot of developers in Colombia. So we were born sort of like a global startup by default,
And what city in Colombia were you in?
Bogota.
What was it like doing business between, you had Chile, you had Bogota, you had New York? What was that experience like?
I always believed that Latin America, we have a lot of talented people at the same time zone of the US. And of course, because of the currency difference, the salaries are, and because of, less competition from employers, salaries are lower, and you can have a bigger impact, and empower also talented people to work on global projects. So to me, that was sort of like an obvious thing. I didn't know why more people weren't doing it. Now it's more clear. A lot of Silicon Valley companies are opening offices in Latin America. But yeah, I mean, it has challenges as well because you have to travel, you have to communicate, more. But it was great. In fact, one of the things that we did was we did a retreat in the mountains in Colombia, in which we went all the team together for a month to build a product, and that was a great experience as well. So yeah, I mean, it was challenging, but also very productive.
How many people were you when you did that retreat into the mountains?
I think we were 8 people.
Oh, wow. So you were a fairly decent sized team already.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that?
Well, I had heard this idea from someone else, and I thought it was a great way to, have a lot, because we were a remote company in a way, to have a lot done in a very short period of time, and also build team spirit. And yeah, so it was a good experience. And then we did it again with Bluesmart. In Hong Kong, we all moved together, and we were basically, we took over a neighborhood in Hong Kong, and we did something like that. And it's amazing the output that you can get when everybody's together.
How many people were you in Hong Kong when you did it?
In Hong Kong, we were 11 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's big. So I know a couple of people that have done that with like 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to startup founders when they're just getting started, if they're thinking about doing a retreat like that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, if you can, it depends, of course, on your personal situation, but if you can, it's great because you get a lot done. You build a bond with the team. This is one of the things that also Y Combinator advises. When they make you move to Mountain View, and they suggest, ideally they all the founders move together to one house and live together and work together all the time. And yeah, it's great. That's how, Airbnb and Dropbox and many of these big success stories from Y Combinator got started.
And you said you raised money with WeHostels. Was that Latin American investors or were that US?
It was a combination of both. We had Latin American investors and New York investors. It was sort of like a syndicate.
What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. At the time in 2011, there were, I think, I feel that in the last few years, the concept of tech startups became more mainstream in the world and Latin America in particular. But back then it was, challenging. Definitely there aren't that many investors in Latin America. But, like everything, you just have to persist and network and don't get defeated by rejection. But yeah, we got it done. I think there's a luck portion as well, for sure. But yeah, I traveled to Argentina, I traveled to Colombia, I traveled to New York, I traveled to San Francisco. I went to where the investors were, basically.
Were you a U.S. incorporated company or somewhere in Latin America?
Yeah. From the beginning, we were a U.S. Delaware company.
And what was the reaction from New York and San Francisco investors back in 2011, 2012, when you were asking for investment and talking about having an office in Colombia?
I think it was less normal than it is today. But when you explain the reasoning, you say, look, I am Argentinian, I speak Spanish, I know the culture, I know where to look for talent, and we are in the same time zone or practically the same time zone. It made sense. So it wasn't a big problem. Now I feel that it's actually a good thing. Investors see it as a positive thing.
That's good. I mean, that hasn't really been our experience over the last 6 months to a year with our companies as they've been going. It's been seen as either a neutral or negative. Still, which is,
well, I think the investors still expect the headquarters to be here,
definitely
either in SF or in New York. But I think it's changing. I think more and more people are, I mean, even now with the immigration restrictions that, this government wants to implement in the US, it's becoming even more clear that, 90% of the talent in the world is outside of the US. So I think we're going to see more and more. And I'm getting the feeling that investors see it as a positive.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely going in that direction. I mean, as more and more companies like yours and others start to be successful, it's something that I think you can't really ignore.
Mm-hmm.
So you raised money. You had your team in Colombia. You were in New York. What happened next? How did you grow?
Yeah, so I mean, we started growing a very competitive market. Again, we started a company with no idea of the market. We were just trying to do an app that we wanted for ourselves, right? And then we realized, wow, we're competing with Booking.com. We're competing with Airbnb that was starting to grow a lot. So we got the challenges of breaking out in the market. At the beginning, we had the competitive advantage of having a great mobile app in an empty space, but then everybody started to getting their act together in mobile. So we kind of lost our competitive advantage, but still we had great products and good users that were using a lot of the products. And at the time we were, looking to do partnerships with other travel companies. And out of one of these conversations, an acquisition offer came. And because we were seeing the challenges ahead, we decided that it was a good thing to sell the company. So we sold the company early on. Again, we were, 13 or 14 employees at the time. And it was a small acquisition. Investors got their money back and we were able to get, some small outcome for us. And it was a good end of this first story. The products that we built became the foundation for the mobile platform of the company that acquired us. And most of our teams still working for them, so it was an interesting closing of that chapter.
Can you talk a little bit more about how that acquisition came up and what strategies you used to make it happen? Because that's one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs, they haven't heard a story like that before, especially ones from Latin America.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I was looking to get some partnerships to help us increase distribution. So I was talking to several companies in related spaces, right? And out of one of these conversations, one of the companies that I was talking to said, look, we love what you guys are doing. It's very complementary with what we do. Why don't we, instead of doing a partnership, you guys come and we do it together? And then that was the first conversation in which we said, okay, let's talk specifics. And then, we kept, building on that relationship, as we, with the board of the company decided that there was an opportunity worth pursuing. We, talked to other companies as well to, entertain, to find what was the best option. And then, we ended up, going forward with the first company that wanted to do something together with us. And then, yes, there is a lot of due diligence and all the typical stuff that happens to close a deal, similar to closing an investment. And yeah, I mean, it's always difficult because you don't know if a deal like that is going to happen until the very end. And in the meantime, it's a distraction for everyone in the team. But fortunately, we were able to get it done, and it was relatively good for everyone.
It's really good. I mean, you were one of the first companies from Latin America in tech to get an acquisition, right? More or less?
No, I mean, there's been several cases before, and actually many, much more successful than us. In Argentina, we have Mercado Libre, a company that went public in NASDAQ, Globant as well. So our case was just a small success story, but yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a good story for a new generation of founders that were building these sort of like cross-border companies.
Yeah, exactly. That's more what I meant, where there have been lots of big companies that have been built, but more along the lines of WeHostels was more along the lines of like a typical Silicon Valley or New York company that builds and then gets acquired, and then you go on to the next thing.
Right.
So let's talk about the next thing. How quickly did you come up with your next business idea?
Yeah, 1 year after, so we went and joined the company that bought us and worked for them. And 1 year after that, this idea was something that I was talking with a friend, and we had no idea about. I actually had no idea about building a hardware company, but I always felt attracted about building a physical product, and playing around with atoms and not just with bits. And my friend actually had experience, from manufacturing products in China, so we decided to give it a go, and we started by launching a crowdfunding campaign to validate the idea. And that crowdfunding campaign went really well. We got $2.2 million on pre-orders, 10,000 travelers around the world who pre-ordered the product, and then we decided to go full on, and make it happen.
How much planning did you do on the product before you did the crowdfunding?
I mean, a lot, actually. We did a lot of, one of the co-founders, Alejo, he's a designer, and he went crazy on researching, talking to users, studying the technologies that were available. And, we did a lot of research before launching, and a lot of prototyping. We went to China, we got factories that could make the product. We started building prototypes. So there was a lot of work in a short period of time. By the point that we launched a crowdfunding project, we had a lot of certainty that the product could be built, and we felt that we knew that people were going to want the product, and we validated that with a crowdfunding campaign.
Beyond having a very good product for the crowdfunding, what strategies did you use to make sure that it got out to the right people and that you got to your goal?
Yeah, I mean, we focused a lot on PR. We knew that was going to be a big impact channel. So we actually worked with a PR firm that helped us, tell the story of the product. And it was a very unique and novel story. It was an idea that nobody had done. It was the first smart suitcase, right? And that caught the attention of a lot of journalists, and we got a lot of press. That was the main driver of people to the campaign, and people loved the product. And I think it was the right time, the right idea, the right time. And yeah, of course, we worked really hard on trying to tell the story in the best possible way and to spread it as far as possible. But everything, conspired to make it successful.
So you raised $2.2 million from pre-sales. What did you do next to deliver on that promise?
Yeah, next we moved the entire team to Hong Kong, and we focused on manufacturing the product. That was the only thing that we cared for. And we would go to the factory every week. Not everyone, but the ones who needed to go to the factory would go to the factory every week, being on top of the people that are partners in the factory. And yeah, 9 months later, we were shipping the product. And unfortunately, the product, was on time, and people loved it. And then it was just about improving the product experience and going into the market, through other channels like retail and e-commerce and Amazon and so forth.
And before you went to Hong Kong, how many people were you, and how was the team distributed?
Before we went to Hong Kong, we were 6 people. By the time that we got to Hong Kong, we had hired some more people, and we were 11 people. And yeah, by the time that we shipped the product, we were about, around 15 people probably.
Wow. And where were all those people from?
A lot of Argentinians, because, the founders were mainly Argentinians. So the first people you hire is your friends, right? But then we had Hong Kongese people, Taiwanese people, what else? British people, Spanish people. It was a very international team.
It's interesting. It's one of those, I think you said it earlier, with a lot of the companies that have Latin America and US offices, that they're international from day one.
Right.
And so you deliver the product, and you talked about going into new channels. What was the next step?
Yeah, well, the next step is we moved back to California, and actually something interesting here happened, which is that we felt by some people's advice that we needed to build the entire team in California because we already had an operation in Hong Kong, and having 3 offices was like insane. But we had a lot of problems hiring good people in California because it's so competitive. You're competing with Google and Facebook and Apple and everyone else, and we couldn't find good people. And in the meantime, we knew that in Latin America, we had very talented people who killed to work for us. So then we decided to, after a few months in California, failing at building the team that we wanted, we decided to open an office in Buenos Aires. And then we started hiring people in Buenos Aires, and it was great because, we found amazing people that were willing to, they were very, passionate about the project. They were very proud that an Argentinian company was playing at a global scale, and they wanted to be part of that. So today, our biggest office is in Buenos Aires. We have over 30 people in Argentina.
A lot of people would ignorantly say, there's not much talent in Latin America. How do you respond to someone who says that?
Well, look, we have countries with millions of people. Some percentage of the population are very talented. Our universities are really good, actually. And we live in a time in which all information of the world is available online. So 10 years ago, probably if you were in Silicon Valley, you had access to the latest frameworks and technologies. But now, a developer goes to, Stack Overflow, to GitHub, and they can learn from the best in real time. So there is really no barrier to learn from the best in the world. So I think that we do definitely have a lot of talent. Now, one challenge is that we don't have Facebooks and Googles and Apples in Latin America that can generate a lot of alumni that bring the experience of high-scale companies. That's the benefit of Silicon Valley. But again, there is talent, and there are now these companies like Mercado Libre and Globant and Despegar and many others that have trained hundreds and thousands of very talented developers and other talents.
What kind of talent specifically is easy to find or that you hire in Argentina?
Argentina is known for creativity, I think. It's known for the advertising industry and for the, film and these kind of industries. So when it comes to startups in Argentina, you find great designers and great creative people. But there are also really good developers. For example, now Bitcoin and blockchain is an area that, understandably, because currencies and finances are a problem in our country for a long time. So a lot of developers got interested in that early on. So there is a big knowledge base around those topics. And then there is a lot of people who speak good English. So, for example, we have our entire customer support team in Argentina for the world, and these are like bilingual people that live in Buenos Aires. So, yeah, I think, probably what is hard to find in Argentina for us is hardware engineers that had experience, developing consumer electronics, because we don't have a consumer electronics industry in Argentina very developed yet. But yet we found some good people, but it's probably an area that is a little bit harder.
Yeah, I mean, Argentina is known for advertising and for movies. Do you have any recommendations for people that maybe haven't checked out anything from either Argentine advertising or movies that they should check out?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of commercials of Coca-Cola and Nike and, car companies are done by Argentinian agencies. In fact, there is one agency called Revolucion that is a friend of ours who helped us with our videos. And they've done amazing work for global brands from Argentina. So yeah, that's one, for example.
Yeah. If you look at like Argentine beer commercials, they're just, from what I've seen, the best in the world.
Yeah. Well, this agency Revolucion work on many of the Quilmes ones.
Yep. Those are awesome. For your support people, are they Argentines that speak English, or are they native speakers that also speak Spanish?
We have one girl that is American, but she moved to Argentina with her parents when she was a kid. But then the rest are Argentinians who study English. Yeah.
And why did you choose to hire Argentinians instead of looking for foreigners with native speakers to do customer support?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're looking for people who speak high proficiency level of English. And, if they are from other countries, we don't care, but so far we found Argentinians who speak English. So yeah.
That's cool. So you have your Argentina office, you have your New York office, and do you still have anything in California?
Yeah, not in California anymore. We closed California, but we do have Hong Kong still.
And what's that like to work on 3 different offices, one that's on a completely different time zone? And
yeah,
what strategies do you use to make sure that works?
Definitely a challenge. And the solution is a lot of communication, a lot of calls in the night or very early in the morning, to speak with Asia. And then a lot of travel as well. So right now, for example, in this very moment, we have 3 Argentinians in Hong Kong who are working with Hong Kongese guys. There are 2 guys from Argentina coming to New York next week. And yeah, so there is a lot of traveling to make sure that we can work together effectively.
And do you use any specific software to make it work?
We use Telegram a lot. We used to use Slack, but we moved to Telegram, and it's working very well. And then, of course, Skype and Google Hangouts and email, and yeah.
Do you have any specific either meeting times or strategies that you use to make sure that everyone is on the same page?
No, to be honest, we are very ad hoc, and when we need to talk, everybody knows that they have to be, attentive to respond messages quickly. But it's very, informal. Yeah.
And how many people are you now?
So we are 39 people right now.
Wow. So you've grown pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, in a hardware company or a company like ours, we need a lot of people. We need hardware engineers, software engineers. We need marketing, sales, customer support, supply chain and distribution. So a lot of moving parts. And we're trying to keep the team as small as possible, actually.
So how did you pay for the expansion of the team from after you had your, you went 5 to 9 to 11 or 15 when you were first doing the prototype? And then went to California. How did you finance that?
Yeah, we raised a round of funding. After we did Y Combinator, we raised a round of funding, and with that round, we completed the first stage of shipping the product and entering retail and so forth. And most recently, we raised a second round of funding. By the way, one thing that is interesting there is that the lead investor was a Chinese fund from Shanghai. And then the fund, the round was followed by a fund from Brazil and a fund from Mexico. So very international also investors, bridging Latin America and Asia in this case. And so we financed the growth of the company with that, and also with revenue. The revenues fortunately has continued to grow, and yeah.
What made you decide to do Y Combinator after you had a successful sale of 2.2 million on Indiegogo?
One of the things I learned in Startup Chile is the importance of communities and the importance of a peer network and the importance of developing relationships that can help you along the way. So that was one of the things that interested us about Y Combinator. Definitely the mentorship of very successful entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley who've seen all sort of companies go from zero to billions of dollars in valuations and revenue was something that we wanted to learn from. And yeah, it was basically that. And, I have a few friends who had done Y Combinator and they highly recommended it. So we figured it was a good thing.
How quickly after Y Combinator did you raise your next round?
We started racing when we finished Y Combinator, and probably we closed around in 3 months, 2-3 months.
How long did you continue to grow after you raised that first round, after Y Combinator, until you had to raise your next round?
I think it was about a year and a half. So or 2 years, actually. 2 years. Yes.
So take me through the process of growing. you'd already delivered your 10,000 units. You're already selling product. What did that look like on the inside of the company?
It looked like a shit show. I mean, a lot of moving parts, and you are building an airplane on the air, and you try to grow as fast as possible. You try to. There are a lot of fires. There's something that Reid Hoffman says about scaling a company. You cannot try to put water on all the fires that are there. So you have to let some things go on fire, and you just have focus on the most important things. And a company like ours, the more you grow, the more things get complex, the more money you need, because you have inventory and working capital requirements, and all these kind of complexities. So yeah, I mean, it was very messy, and still is, frankly, but if you focus on the most important things, which is basically making a good product, serving our customers well, and having a great team, and executing things with momentum, I think that the rest ends up getting resolved at some point.
What advice would you give to founders that are not in San Francisco or New York, whether they're in, the middle of the US somewhere or in Latin America, for one, launching a product, and then two, raising money in the States?
I think, first and foremost, stay there. You don't have to move to Silicon Valley. You have to, it's good to go to Silicon Valley to develop relationships and eventually to raise capital. But I think, right now, I think it's a competitive advantage not to be in Silicon Valley in terms of access to talent. I think that focus on making a good product and getting traction with the product. The bar for raising capital has raised a lot, and now investors expect you to have significant traction before you can raise money. So focus on that. Try to progress as much as possible before you try to raise money, and harness the local talent, which is, at the end of the day, a company is a group of people together building a product that hopefully a lot of people will want to pay for. So focus on that.
Can you tell me about what it was like to raise your latest round from, 3 different countries, and were there cultural differences between the different places that you raised in terms of the pitch you had to bring?
Definitely there are huge cultural differences in China. Definitely the US and Latin America, even though there are cultural differences, we're way closer. We are, Westerns. We are, we have languages that have the same root in Latin, right? With China, we're talking about an entire different worldview. But when it comes to business, there is a lot of common language and common understandings. And of course, I don't speak a word of Chinese, so I had to do my pitching in English. It's impressive how fast the Chinese have learned the ways of Silicon Valley, and so you can you can pitch the exact same way that you would pitch in Silicon Valley, and they will get it. And of course, there are certain things that they're looking for. But it's not as difficult as you have been, in the past. And definitely the challenge is that you have to travel a lot and you have to focus. It takes a lot of attention out of you to do fundraising. But I think, I see that this is going to happen more and more. Rounds that are, syndicates of funds from different places around the world. In a way, Silicon Valley now has being globalized, and is a state of mind, is a place that lives all over the world. It's not just a physical place. So I think we're going to see more and more this kind of rounds and these kind of companies.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's interesting now because if you're podcast number 8, and you're the third of the entrepreneurs that has had pretty deep experience with China. Which when I talk to my friends and entrepreneur friends in the States, I don't think I know more than 3 or 4 that have any experience with China.
Mm.
Do you think that that's something specific about coming from Latin America that you're more willing to look abroad, or, just coincidence?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think that, for us, the fact that we already are, immigrants, we already are, outside of our comfort zone, and already the world is our canvas. We probably don't see China or other areas as, as challenging as someone who never, built a company outside of their own country. So in a way, there is definitely an advantage on already being an immigrant and or an outsider. But again, I think we're in a moment of the world that is changing a lot. I mean, imagine 20 years ago, someone building a company in 3 different continents. It would be unthinkable. So I think that this is because the convergence of, communication technologies, like WeChat, you can speak with anybody in China. The convergence of, an information sharing platform that allows everybody to understand the same meanings when it comes to building companies. And I think that's a very recent phenomenon. And I think that we are taking advantage of it, but I think it's going to become more and more the norm.
Yeah, I think you're right too. It's still surprising to me that it's not more normal.
Right.
In your sales channels today, how is it broken up in terms of geography? Are you selling to people generally in a couple countries, or is it all over the world?
Yeah, I mean, initially we basically opened to sell anywhere in the world, but that was a mistake because, the logistics became impossible to manage. So right now we're refocusing on the main markets, and the main markets for us are the US, the UK, Canada, and then in Asia, Hong Kong, and a little bit of Korea and Japan. In Latin America, we sell in Argentina and in Mexico as well, but trying to focus on the main markets.
And tell me a little bit more about the product as it is today. What are some of the features? What type of person buys it? What's the price?
Yeah, so as I said, it's a smart connected suitcase utilizing the latest technologies that you can find in your smartphone to make the travel experience more seamless. And we currently have 2 versions of a carry-on suitcase that are, perfect for a business traveler who wants to be connected, who wants to protect their belongings. Soon we're going to be announcing some new things, so stay tuned and, check out our website in a few weeks. Probably when the podcast come out, we're going to be closer to that date. But yeah, I mean, the idea is to build products that combine hardware and software and the latest technologies to make the travel experience seamless, and hopefully reduce some of the hassles that happens all the time to people who travel frequently.
Do you have any interesting stories of customers who have used the product that would have either, lost their luggage or have some sort of positive experience because of the product they bought?
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot of stories now, people that lost their suitcase and were able to retrace it back. People that, we had a story of someone who was about to lose their flight because they didn't have their boarding pass on their phone, and they were able to charge their phone with the suitcase, and as a result of that, don't miss the flight. And yeah, a lot of great stories of people that get stopped in the airports, and people ask them, what is this suitcase? It has a little light that indicates when the suitcase is connected to your phone. So yeah, it's great to see a lot of travelers, using and enjoying the product.
Can you share any numbers about how many people are using it today?
Yeah, over 35,000.
Wow.
Today.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's impressive growth.
Thank you.
Do you have any other tips for people who are thinking about building a hardware company?
Yeah, I mean, for building a hardware company, I think that the first thing you need to know is that it is harder. The typical saying we say is hardware is hard. it is harder, but at the same time, I truly believe that a lot of innovation is going to continue coming from hardware. I think that all hardware that makes sense is hardware that is driven by software. Dumb hardware doesn't make, or there isn't that much place for innovation in just hardware. But, computers, I think everything is going to become a computer, every product that's around us. So converting products into computers, I think, is a good opportunity. So focus on the software and the truly defensible aspect of what you're building, and then be ready to a lot of rock and roll. Be ready to having to go to China to a very dynamic lifestyle. But it's fun. It's definitely fun.
What would you tell someone who they were at the same stage as you were with having a good idea that they want to start checking out hardware wise in Hong Kong or China? What would you tell them? How would you, maybe 3 to 5 tips of going over there?
Yeah, I think, go to Shenzhen. Shenzhen they call it the Silicon Valley of hardware. Shenzhen is a city that is next to Hong Kong, where there are, thousands of factories and accelerators and workshops and 3D printing clubs and all these kind of things. And just go there, spend some time there, tap into your network, and it's amazing how fast you can get things prototyped there now, and use that time to really see what's possible, and iterate as much as possible before going and launching a product on crowdfunding. And then once you do it, make sure that you can tell a great story around what you're building. I think those will be the main tips.
So I usually ask a surprising thing or two that people in the US don't know about Latin America, but let's do Latin America and China.
Okay. Let's see. About building companies in those places?
Either building companies, hiring talent, doing business, anything that people wouldn't know.
Yeah, well, I think, definitely our cultures in Latin America, we are much more relationship oriented, beyond the fact that we kiss and hug when we meet someone new. We are more, sometimes, you have to build a relationship first and then do business, as opposed to cultures that are more straight to business, right? So, if you go to Latin America, go and eat, have food and get drunk first and then do business, Mm-hmm. And that's one thing. When it comes to China, let's see. When it comes to China, I think you have to be more respectful. They are more respectful culture. The way that you, from the way that you give away your business card with your 2 hands, to the way that you sit down in a table to have a meeting, I think they are more formal and more respectful. And they also want to build a relationship before they do business. So spend some time, having a tea and talking about business and life before going down to specific of the business.
And how about going back the other way? What are things that Latin American entrepreneurs would find surprising about doing business in the US?
Well, I think the opposite, that in the US, everybody's straight to business and emails are shorter and straight to the bone. And so don't get shocked if someone responds an email with 1 line and being very straight to business, and be able to communicate in that way. And definitely in the US, you have a lot of super talented people from all over the world that come here. So you need to level up your game before coming to the US. Make sure or come to the US, but be ready to improve yourself at a very fast pace if you want to compete in the top leagues, because again, it's like for a soccer player to go and play in the Champions Leagues, right? So you have to be on top of your game.
And so since you've had experience with both California and New York, and you ended up in New York, can you talk a little bit about the difference between doing business or starting your startup in California versus New York?
Yeah, for sure. California definitely is the capital of technology. You have the best technology companies in the world and the best technologists in the world. Um, New York, on the other hand, is more diverse, and in New York you have people who know a lot about marketing and branding and distribution and sales and media and fashion and the finances and these kind of things. So it depends on the type of company that you're building, where it makes sense to be. In the other hand, California, is very, one of the things I love about California is that people really want to change the world, and they are more generous when it comes to helping each other out. In New York, it's more about money and success. In the other hand, New York is more connected to the world. You have JFK flies to any country in the planet. California is more isolated. If you need to fly from California to Argentina, you need to do a stop in Dallas or in Miami. So New York is much more connected, more global. The two places are great. I love the two places, and I think it depends on your lifestyle, and depends on the type of company that you want to build, where you want to be.
What would you tell U.S. investors about looking at companies with your structure that have a U.S. office and a LATAM office?
I think that is the way to go. I think that it's a competitive advantage. That is a secret. We say that it's our secret weapon. Having a super amazing team in Argentina. Of course, you need to make sure that the founders are good communicators and are, it's people that will do anything to make it work. But with that, cover, I think it's a great setup.
What advice would you give to investors that are in Latin America that are trying to find the next Bluesmart, to either that wants to go to the US or just to build it directly from Latin America?
I would say take more risk. I would say, Latin America, if we are to develop, we cannot continue to rely just on commodities and on all industries. And the only way to develop the industries of the future is by taking risks, failing a lot, but that's how we're going to find the next, big thing. So be willing to take risk and understand that the game in technology is try to find a few big winners and allowing yourself to have many losers, and that's okay. Invest again on people who failed because they learn. So basically, take more risk.
And how have you seen the ecosystem develop since, when you first left Argentina for your master's in Spain, all the way through till today? What's it look like for when you look back for the development of the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, I think definitely I see more things happening. There's more awareness of the tech scene and being an entrepreneur. In Argentina, I've seen it. With this new government, is very focused on fostering entrepreneurship. Chile as well, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia. These countries are. I see a lot coming from there. I think we still have a long way to go, and we need to keep getting better and better, and keep building bridges with the rest of the world to learn best practices and to create this sort of like stories.
Say you were in charge of the entrepreneurial policy of, or even just the business policy in general of, say, Argentina or any of the South American countries. What would be your top couple of recommendations to get the country's ecosystems to go better?
Yeah, well, I actually know some of the guys in the Argentina entrepreneurship team, and I think that they're doing things right. They've made a lot of progress on reducing the bureaucracy of opening a new company, reducing taxes for new companies, making it easier to raise capital and making it easier to hire and fire people, which is, an essential part of an early stage company. I think it's basically getting out of the way and making things, not adding obstacles on the life of the entrepreneur at the beginning. And then if you can also attract capital to come to the country and invest in these kind of assets, I think that is also something interesting. We need more there are many countries in Asia, like Singapore and Korea, in which the government steps in to attract funds and they match funds. Well, Chile is doing that too, right? Matching funds so that, private investors, get, more leverage to invest in technology companies. These kind of things that I can think of.
It's
And,
interesting.
and one more thing I would say is, education. Definitely, we need more technology education, more engineers.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the government's support. So, we're at Magma, we're the only fund that didn't take that from the Chilean government. Because from our perspective, it's less about, at least in Chile, because there's a lot of funds and government money. It's not so much about the money. It's more about people like you and other successful entrepreneurs showing that they've done it, and then also giving best practices to the younger people that are just getting started.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit more about Argentina and the changes that are happening in the government and the entrepreneurial policy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited. I know many of the people who are there, like Mariano Meyer, who is in charge of entrepreneurship for the country. They have great intentions. They are doing as much as you can to transform not only the legal system, but also the cultural aspect of entrepreneurship in the country. And it's not a transformation that you're going to do from one day to another. I think that it takes years to create an entrepreneurial culture. Argentinians think we are entrepreneurial, very much just, because we have no option. We have a crisis every 10 years, so we need to figure our own things out. But I think that I'm hopeful Argentina, it has a lot of potential. Latin America as well. We're a great region of the world with, beautiful people. And we just need to put our act together, and then we can have a lot of prosperity for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's definitely starting to change even on a region level. If you had to go back and give advice to yourself as you were just starting WeHostels, but with everything that you know now, what's the one or two things that you would tell yourself?
I would probably tell myself to be more balanced. At the beginning, you take it to extremes and don't take care of yourself, right? And that ends up not being positive in the long term. You need to take care of yourself. You need to have a balanced lifestyle. You need to work hard. Don't get me wrong. You need to work really, really hard, but also take care of yourself, do sports and do meditation and do whatever, helps you stay grounded and healthy. That's one thing. I think that look for advice as early as possible. Look for feedback, not only advice, but for feedback, from your peers, look for criticism early on. And I think this is something Elon Musk, I think I heard him saying, look for the smartest people and ask them what's wrong with your idea and take that feedback. Of course, don't take everything, but take the things that can help make the idea better. That I think can save a lot of time.
I think that's really important, especially for entrepreneurs that are not in San Francisco and New York.
Yeah.
I mean, in my case, with my second business, I was in Madison, Wisconsin, which it's only about, I think with all the suburbs together, it's only 400,000 or 500,000 people.
Right.
And when we were doing our business, everybody said for about the first year, you guys are amazing. It's the best thing ever.
Right.
It was all great feedback. And we launched the product. It was good. We got press. And then we did a 10-day trip where we went to Silicon Valley and then to New York, and with a stop in Chicago on the way. And we just got ripped up for 10 days.
Right.
And it was the best thing that ever happened to us because we changed the model and it helped.
Right.
And I think that same thing happens a lot in Latin American countries because the same as in Madison, we want to have a success story so bad that we push people to go forward. So I always tell people, be brutal. We need the bad feedback.
Yeah, and don't take it personal. When I get young entrepreneurs at the beginning of their careers coming to me, I try to be as honest as possible. And sometimes I feel bad because, that means sometimes saying, criticizing their idea. And I know how myself, I used to take it personally as well, that's wrong. You had to be super open to criticism, listen very carefully, and then have the criteria to know what are you going to take and what you're not going to take.
Yeah, that's a really important part. From the best entrepreneurs that I've worked with, they do exactly what you said. They're really good at listening, taking all the info in, and then weighing their decision and deciding which to keep and which not to.
Exactly.
How did you become good at that? Because that's an important skill for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think that, is being thoughtful in the sense of thinking a lot about the feedback that you get. And yeah, I mean, like, the danger of that side is that experts are experts in the past and not in the future, and things are changing a lot. So you have to take the things of experts of the industry with that, thinking in mind. There are things that are changing. So what are things are changing? And then ultimately, I think it's an intuition call, is talking to your co-founders. And, we had a lot of arguments with our co-founders, and the good thing is that everybody is very opinionated, but nobody think that they have the ultimate truth. So yeah, talk to your co-founders a lot, and together make these kind of decisions, these kind of calls.
Do you remember the best advice that you got during your entrepreneurial career?
Look, I think the best advice is never give up, because at the end of the day, that is for life as well, no? That's the only thing that the ones who win are the ones who don't give up, at the end of the day, generally.
Do you have any books or blog posts that you like to recommend to founders?
Yeah, there is one book that I really like called Beyond Entrepreneurship by James Collins, the author of Good to Great, in which he talks about, it's more like it's not a typical startup book. It's more like a old-fashioned book, but a lot of really good insights about building companies that last, companies that will last forever, or for a long time. And then, the typical ones like 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel, and The Hard Things About Hard Things from Bernd Horowitz. These are great books. And then I like a lot of books that are not about entrepreneurship to get motivated about entrepreneurship. Like I like books about, travelers, or a book about heroes, these kind of things. Sometimes you need to think yourself as a hero, So these kind of epic stories are always good motivation as well. Oh, by the way, another book is the book from the founder of Nike, Shoe Dog. He tells the story of how he built Nike. Great book as well.
That's been on my list for a while. I should definitely get that.
Really good.
Awesome. Well, do you have anything that you'd like to talk about where Bluesmart is going over the next, 6 months into the future?
As I said, we're going to be introducing some new products, very exciting ones. And then, we're going to continue on our mission to bring innovation to the travel goods industry and making great products that help people travel better. And that's the main focus.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we could talk for another few hours about entrepreneurship and travel and life and all of that. But, I got to let you get back to your day. And I'm really glad we were able to connect. Like we talked about just before we got on air.
Yeah.
We had been basically in a parallel story for 6 years, but only crossed paths on the internet. So it was good. We'll
have to grab a beer soon.
Yeah, the next time I'm in New York, I'll shoot you a message and we can grab a beer.
Totally.
And maybe a year from now or 9 months down the road, we can do a round 2 and hear where you and Bluesmart are going.
For sure.
Awesome.
All right, man.
Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation with Diego, because I know I did. You can find more information about Bluesmart at bluesmart.com. And as always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a rating. let Diego and I know you enjoyed it. Thanks again.